The vertebrate group that almost everyone's familiar with a little bit is the mammals. The mammals evolved from an amniotic ancestor before the birds. So they arose during before the dinosaurs. They were actually existing around the time of the dinosaurs. Um, and it's just that for the most part, mammals were relatively small and less diverse during the time of the dinosaurs. But after the dinosaurs went extinct, there was a bunch of resources now available that the dinosaurs had been using. And so there was a great diversity of mammals that arose after that time. And so today, if you look at Earth, the variety of mammals out there in size and body form is really unmatched by any other group of vertebrates. So what makes a mammal a mammal? First of all, they have mammary glands, and the mammary glands produce milk. So that's the key feature. So remember that that's a pretty specific definition. There's other organisms that can give their animals some kind of milk. There's other organisms that have live birth, because you may have heard that one. Remember, there's other organisms that are warm-blooded. So that's another area of confusion that people have sometimes gotten from previous times when they've learned about mammals. None of those are defining to mammals. Only mammary glands that secrete milk are defining to mammals. And so that's kind of the key feature. In addition to that, all mammals also have some hair. That can be a lot of hair, like if you think of fur, or it can be like the amount of hair that we have. They're the only vertebrates with specialized teeth. So we don't just have one type of teeth. We have molars, we have canines, we have incisors. That's a mammal trait. Our skulls are much bigger than other animals relative to body size. So this is a ratio, right? So compared to body size, the skull is bigger. And so that allows for a larger brain. So mammals in general have a larger brain than other animals compared to other vertebrates compared to body size. The jawbone is different, so it's all one piece, which is different. The inner ear bones are different. We have the 3 inner ear bones. And this is not present in other vertebrates. In fact, this is one that's useful in the fossil record because you can find those inner ear bones fossilized. And then the external ears having a structure on the outside is also a mammalian trait. So hair, as I mentioned, is a mammalian trait. It has a diversity of functions in mammals. So for warmth and insulation, that's a big purpose of it. Mammals are endothermic, and so they use the fur to help maintain their body temperature in the way that birds used feathers to maintain their body temperature because they're also endothermic. The hair can be colored. So the fur can make a camouflaged coat like we see here with this lynx. They can have sensory hairs, so the hairs are modified to be whiskers that fill in their sensory perceptions. They can have defensive quills. So here's a porcupine with like the quills sticking out. And then hair can also be for mate attraction. So hair can help disperse pheromones or in some other way attract a mate. And so if you think about humans, this is the primary purpose that hair serves in humans still is mate attraction. Teeth adaptations. So remember that mammals have these specialized teeth, and we see a lot of specialized uses for those teeth. And so why would this be significant evolutionarily? Remember that specialized teeth and all these adaptations of the teeth is going to help them find different food sources. So this is what allows you to have so many mammals, is because they're going to be able to not compete with each other by accessing different food resources. So they have teeth for biting, like we see here, for grinding, like these molars here in this, maybe a cow or a horse. Gnawing, like this beaver, tusks, like in an elephant, grasping teeth, like we see here in this dolphin. Oops, and I have tested there twice. So these are all allowing the animal to access different food or have some different function, which separates competition and helps them be better adapted to their environment. So even more ways that mammals can be adapted for different environments. We see some mammals that can digest cellulose. So cellulose, remember, is the material that makes up plant cell walls, and it's connected by a glycosidic bond that is unable to be digested by most organisms on Earth. So grass is high in cellulose. If you eat grass, you can't really break it down. It will come out of your digestive system undigested. But something like a cow or a deer or a bison, they have evolved a partnership with bacteria that break down the cellulose. And so their stomach has to be a friendly place for those bacteria. So that's why everybody's adapted to live together. So the stomachs of these organisms are very friendly to these bacteria and help those bacteria break down the cellulose. And the bacteria benefit, the bison benefit. We also see mammals that have horns or antlers. So horns are a permanent outgrowth. It's a permanent bony outgrowth, so they don't come off. They're surrounded by keratin, so this is what we see here. Antlers are composed entirely of bone, but they can be shed and regrown, and so that's what we see here. This is what you see on elk or deer in Colorado, for example. And so these are oftentimes used for defense or for mating behaviors, like to fight with other males. So there is a ton of different mammals out there. We're going to focus on just 3 major groups of mammals. There are the monotremes. The monotremes are your egg-laying mammals. So these are the only types of mammals that lay eggs. Probably one of the most well-known is the platypus, which you see here, the duck-billed platypus. The echidna is another example. They do not have a placenta, so they don't have the ability to feed young inside of them. So that's why they have to lay eggs. They do secrete milk from mammary glands. The nipples are on the underside of their belly, and they kind of drip milk. They're not very well-developed nipples. They don't work as well as other mammals, and so the milk just kind of oozes out of the nipples, and the babies lick it off of the mother's tummy. Marsupials are another group of mammals. These are primarily found in Australia today. There's also the opossum in North America. What they do is they have a young that develops inside of them with a placenta, but they're not able to get that to support that baby to a big size. So they give birth to very undeveloped young. So this is like a baby kangaroo. So tiny, tiny, tiny. It's about like this big. And so that little baby has to crawl up into her pouch called the marsupium, and then it will hang out in that pouch for a really long time, drinking milk and getting bigger. And so this is a wallaby. Oops. This is a wallaby up here. And the wallaby, this is a much older baby now from that, still living in its mom's pouch, and looking much more like it's going to be ready to live on its own soon. Kind of the classic mammal or the true mammal is the eutherians. These are also sometimes called the placental mammals. They have a long-lived complex placenta that can provide nutrients to the growing offspring for a prolonged gestation period. So in humans, that's a 40-week gestation. In elephants, they have like a 2-year gestation, and that placenta just keeps feeding the baby inside of the mother for those 2 years. This allows the offspring to be more fully developed when they're born. In a lot of animals, in fact most, other than humans, the babies can walk almost immediately. You find eutherians across almost every continent except Australia, though they've been introduced to Australia by colonists. And so these are the most diverse group of mammals. There's a lot of different adaptations to unique environments, food sources, and lifestyles. So again, this is why we kind of consider them the classic mammals. Primates are one group of mammal that we'll take a little closer of a look at. The primates are primarily tree-dwelling species. They first arose about 85 million years ago. Their defining characteristics, a big one is this: the grasping hand with an opposable thumb. So the thumb is in the opposite orientation of the hands that allows for grasping. And I highly recommend you watch some of the inner fish videos. I've got the link here. You can also look this up and see some videos about some of these primate traits. The large primates also are known for large brains. Remember, mammals, I already said, have a larger brain relative to body size. In primates, that's even more dramatic, a much larger brain to body ratio. The digits have flat nails, so your nail instead of claws. We have binocular vision, so that means that we take two images and make one out of it. And then very complex social behavior and well-developed parental care. And those probably go together, right? The young need a lot of care, and so you need social groups that help provide that care. So we're not going to get into all the different names of primates that are presented in your textbook. We'll just look at some major categories and really leading up to looking a little bit at human evolution. So monkeys have tails. They don't have brachiation or no brachiation. Brachiation is a specific way that the shoulder joint can move. And so they don't have it, so they can't swing their shoulder joint in the same way that we can. And monkeys in general are smaller than the other primates. The hominoids include gibbons, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, and humans. They don't have tails. There is brachiation in the shoulder joint, and they're usually larger. And these are often broken into the lesser apes and greater apes, or great apes. So again, we're mainly talking about this so we can talk a little bit about humans. So we belong to the group great apes, along with orangutans, gorillas, and chimpanzees, as well as our closely related human ancestors that are sometimes called hominins. So all of the great apes share a common ancestor. Humans and chimps share the most recent ancestor of the living great apes. So if you look at the cladogram, for us, we share the most recent branch point. And this is reflected in our DNA. If you look at the human and chimp genome, they differ by only 1.23%. So 98.7% the same. That's actually more similar or less difference than between a mouse and a rat. So we have really similar genome to chimpanzees. And there's a really cute baby chimpanzee. So when we look at human evolution, we think about 6 million years ago, the human lineage first split off from primate lineage. So this is not humans, but the beginnings of a separation between us and chimps. So we didn't come from chimps, but we share this ancestor, again, a very, very long time ago, like 6 million years ago. And people are really obviously interested in the story of human evolution. And there's been a couple of really key fossil finds that have helped clarify. We don't have fossils for a lot of stuff, and we certainly don't find tons of human fossils. But I'm just going to talk about a couple that are the most well-known and really important. And so the first one here is Ardipithecine. This was the first bipedal primate. Bipedal means walking on two legs. And so this is one of the really important characteristics of hominins, that is humans and their closest relatives. Other organisms may sometimes walk on their two legs, but hominins mostly walk on their two legs. And that changes the body, right? The legs have to be bigger, the hips have to be different in order to do that. And so that's how we know that from the fossil record, is by looking at the bone structure. And so Ardi was a fossil that was found in Ethiopia that was the earliest one that's been found that shows bipedal movement. Another later human ancestor that was found also in Ethiopia is Lucy. She's called Lucy as her nickname. She belongs to the genus Australopithecine or Australopithecus. And she was very small, so she's only about 3 feet tall, so she'd come to about your hip. But she has a facial structure and brain size that are more similar to a chimp. But again, she was bipedal. So again, as I mentioned, how do we know this? Well, from the fossil record, we see the lower limb bones being bigger. That's for bigger muscle attachments because they're carrying the weight all the time. The pelvis is changed in order for that to accommodate that movement. And the other thing that we see different is the skull placement. If you walk on 4 limbs, your skull is going to be positioned so that you can look comfortably out this way. But if you're standing upright, then you need to have your skull positioned over your spine in a different orientation to be looking straight. And so those are some of the ways we know that a fossil was bipedal. And this is an artist rendition of Lucy, by the way, here. Okay, so our closest relatives belong to the genus Homo. And so genus Homo includes organisms like Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo habilis, and Homo sapiens. That's us. Okay. Homo sapiens originated about 200,000 years ago. We were taller, lighter weight, and actually had slightly smaller brains than Homo neanderthalis, or also just called the Neanderthals for short. And so here's a rendition of what a Neanderthal might have looked like versus a modern human. And you can see some of the possible differences in body form drawn out here between some of the other members of Homo. So when we look at the timeline of human evolution, again, this is just filled in with some of the organisms we think were around based on the fossil record. We don't have everything. Artie is back here. So I mentioned Artie. Here's Lucy. Okay. And then we have the genus Homo beginning more recently, with Homo sapiens being the most recent. And one thing I want to point out here is notice that Homo sapiens coexisted with the Neanderthals and Homo erectus. And you see organisms in our family tree coexisting with each other. And this is one of the big surprises for people as the fossil record has been filled out. And in fact, one of the other big surprises was realizing that, in fact, there was oftentimes interbreeding between these groups of hominins. So, for example, we know that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals definitely did mate with each other. And in fact, modern humans, depending on the person, retains anywhere between 2 and 4 or 5% Neanderthal. That is, everybody does except Africans. Anyone who's of pure African lineage, because the people in Africa never existed with Neanderthals. Neanderthals were in Europe, and modern humans that didn't leave Africa never ended up mating with Neanderthals. So they're the only people who don't have Neanderthal DNA. So just now I was alluding to this, but I haven't mentioned it explicitly. The reason why Africans don't have Neanderthal DNA is because all humans came out of Africa and colonized the rest of the world. So what happened is that you have your first humans arise somewhere around here, and then they begin to migrate into different areas over time. And one of the first places they might have gone was the Middle East, and then out of the Middle East they went into Europe. From the Middle East they also went into Asia. From Asia they went up over into the Americas, and eventually make their way down to South America. Same thing through Australia. And this actually happened over long periods of time with multiple types of hominins. So this first happened, for example, with Neanderthals. Neanderthals moved out of Africa. They first evolved in Africa, then they moved into Europe. And what happened is they didn't survive in Africa, and then they were present in Europe. And then Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, and then came up out of Africa, and then met Neanderthals in Europe and in all these other places. And so where humans and Neanderthals were living outside of Africa, they ended up mating. But because the Neanderthals weren't present in Africa anymore, modern Africans don't have any Neanderthal DNA. So I want to close out with a general just comment, not necessarily just to humans, but to what we've been talking about invertebrates in general. And the question is evolution goal-oriented? So throughout this chapter, we focused on adaptations that vertebrates acquired for life on land. And that's, it covers a lot of traits and it's very interesting. But the question is, was life on land the goal of evolution? And so I hope that you can see that that's not the case, right? The goal of evolution, if there's any goal, right, it's not a driven process, is simply that organisms as they survive and reproduce better, they'll have more traits adapted to an environment. And so land is just one type of environment that some organisms are well adapted to. And so if we think about the dolphin, this is a good way to understand this. The dolphin is a mammal, in case you didn't know that, and it has a mammalian ancestor that evolved for life on land. And that organism then had an ancestor that started heading back towards water. So it came from an ancestor that was living on land and went back to living in water. And so why would it do that? Because there was new opportunities in water, new environments and places to be successful away from other organisms. And so land itself isn't a goal. There's no particular goal. It's just to find a place where you can survive and reproduce. And that drives the evolution of traits that are adapted to the environment. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear about that, since when we talk about life on land, we can get confused and think that that must be the goal of evolution.